What's an interesting fact about the human body that a lot of people don't know?
Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the Vancher channel. Also, please share your thoughts on this video in the comments. Let's get started.
Story 1. So, you know how people with schizophrenia tend to hear voices, telling them all kinds of potential shoot stuff. Well, what do you think happens to people who were born deaf but then get schizophrenia? It turns out that if they were taught sign language, the voices come out as visions of disembodied hands signing at them to tell them the same kinds of shoot stuff. OTOH, people born blind apparently never get schizophrenia. Answer: people with schizophrenia have been scientifically proven to have different visual perception during an attack. Concrete evidence with relief hollow masks. If you show someone the back, hollow side, of the mask during a schizophrenia episode, they will perceive the face as hollow. In a healthy person, or when there is no attack, the face is perceived as protruding, even if the logical part knows exactly that you are looking at the hollow side of the mask. Been there live during examinations. I had already noticed it live with my mother, and she had described it that way. Color perception is also changed, deviated, increased. Likewise, the electrostatic phenomenon is greatly increased. My mother reported leakage currents on the walls at home. They were initially not detectable with equipment at the distance to the lines. During the renovation, however, a lot of small damage caused by aging became apparent, which actually triggered these leakage currents. It is completely justified that people in a schizophrenia attack become totally panicked, with such strong stimuli that you cannot classify and cannot shield yourself from. It can make you afraid and anxious. Story 2. Located in the cochlea in your inner ear, there are about 16,000 hairs called stereocilia. About 4,000 of them are primarily responsible for your ability to hear. If you lost all 4,000 hairs, you would be deaf. If you lose a substantial amount of those hairs, your hearing will be reduced. Loud sounds like machinery, explosions, cars and bikes and amplified music destroys those hairs. There isn't really a may harm or might damage concept, just the degree of damage done when these loud sounds impact the hairs in the cochlea. Once damaged, these hairs never grow back. You have around 4,000, and that is all you will have in your entire life. The more you lose, the worse your hearing will be, forever. Answer: I was also taught that different hairs correspond to different pitches stones, and when you hear a specific hair's pitch, it moves. I believe my professor said they tilted a certain way. I can remember him making a motion with his hand, and this is what helps you hear that particular sound. Is this correct, or am I misremembering? It's been, 14 years, so I might be rusty, haha. Story 3. I was just telling my kids about how if you put on special glasses that turn your vision upside down, after a few days of wearing them, your brain will correct your vision back to right side up. At that point, without the glasses, your normal vision is upside down and takes a few hours to go back. I believe there's a paper by George Stratton about it. Story 4. When you do not get enough sleep, your brain can actually start eating itself. Microglial cells, which are responsible for cleaning up waste in the brain, begin breaking down and consuming healthy neurons and connections, not just damaged ones. This process, known as astrocytic phagocytosis, increases when you are sleep deprived. Over time, this can lead to memory problems, slower thinking, and an increased risk of diseases like Alzheimer's. Story 5. That your stomach gets a brand new lining every 3 to 4 days. That's your body basically saying to not worry about the acid in your stomach is under control. Stomach acid is strong enough to literally eat through metal if it could, so your stomach needs that constant makeover to keep itself from dissolving. Most people have no clue this is happening every single week. Story 6. Oh, okay, I learned this fun one. After some dumb little embryo stupidly implanted in my fallopian tube kept trying to grow until the tube exploded. Next thing you know, I was in a hospital bed post-op from life-saving surgery down in Oregon, one that I had no intention of parting ways with. Fearful that I had essentially lost half my reproductive organs, the surgeon gave me an anatomy lesson. So, typically when an egg is released by the left ovary, the left fallopian tube will snatch it up. Same for the right side. Story 7. I'll use myself for an example. I have a rare trait called antimetropia. In simple terms, that means my eyes have opposite eyesight. One is nearsighted, the other is farsighted. Most people don't seem to know this is possible. Even when I try to order glasses online, the websites tell me my prescription must be wrong because it's too unusual. Story 8. The brain is a very needy drama queen in many ways. It often acts like a selfish tyrant when it feels the need to protect itself. It can and will jeopardize nearly every other bodily system to save itself. For example, fainting is essentially the brain's super cool way of saying, I want better blood flow, but I'm not getting it. Therefore, I will force the body to be horizontal. When you're on the floor, gravity acts in favor of better circulation to the brain than standing upright. The heart and brain are then on the same level. Other examples can include glucose hoarding, blood shunting, and Cushing's reflex, to name a few. Story 9. Edit. Users noticed me that what I described might be called mammalian diving reflex, bradycardic response. Had to search this term. And it makes babies open their eyes and hold their breath underwater. I did some sort of a swimming course with my baby at the local pool. We basically threw the baby in the swimming pool, and it works. The baby holds the breath, like she did during pregnancy. No panic at all. Couldn't believe it at first. It's probably what you are seeing on the cover of Nirvana's Nevermind. Answer. Alternative baby breathing fun fact. Choking babies is terrifying. Choking anyone is terrifying enough, but over a certain age, the standard panic response, meaning that we make noise. A choking baby doesn't have that response. It just gapes its mouth, typically, and goes into euphoria mode. Less fun is that small children in a house fire don't seek safety the way rational thought does. They seek out their own perceived safe space, like under the bed. Story 10. A baby girl is born with all of the eggs she will ever produce. This means when her mother was a fetus, the egg that would someday become her was carried in her maternal grandmother's womb. I adored my maternal grandmother and was extremely close to her. Knowing that she carried and nurtured part of me is such a beautiful thought. Answer. This reminds me of my favorite fact of the body, fetal microchimerism. When a woman conceives a child, cells from the fetus will travel to other parts of her body to protect her from illness. Those cells stay in her body for at least 10 years, but they think they stay there longer, maybe forever. This happens really early in the pregnancy, which was really touching to me because it means I still have cells in my body from my baby who I miscarried. And some of those cells also transfer to your other babies. So my son has cells from his older sibling, even though that baby died early in my pregnancy before I ever conceived my son. Story 11. Most people think celiac disease, a genetic autoimmune disease where the body destroys villi in the small intestine when gluten is consumed, leading to malnutrition, joint pain, ataxia, growth disturbance, and cancer, is something that affects Western populations. But it's actually turning out to be just as common at around 1% of the population in Southeast Asian and African populations, as well as testing increases, particularly through immigration to countries where testing is common. The rate may also be similar in other populations as well, if testing is ramped up there as well. It's also not a new phenomenon. It was first described in ancient Greece, and the Dutch famine in World War II is what helped narrow down gluten as the culprit for what triggered celiac. Children dying of malnutrition in hospitals actually improved during the famine because they were no longer fed bread. Story 12. Completely unscientific shower thought recently, but you have a butt-ton, pun intended, of nerves in your anus and rectum that communicate with your brain to say, nah, that's just a fart, or you need to find a bathroom soon. At least in theory, sometimes there's a mix-up. Story 13. In fact, the nerve comes down from the brain, goes screaming right past the larynx and down to the vicinity of the heart, where it loops under the aortal arch, then finally comes back up to the larynx. And that is true for all mammals. In giraffes, the thing can be about 10 meters long. And the reason it is that way is that evolved from a nerve that used to go from a fish brain to fish gills, and the shortest path was underneath the heart. But as fish evolved, their shape changed, and eventually they acquired a neck, moving the brain to a different place in the body. It's way easier for evolution to just make something longer as opposed to rewiring it. So the RLN just got longer and longer, still looping under the heart. Reason 4821 why we know evolution is real. Story 14. I had to start using hearing aids. I queried why it was difficult for me to know where sound was coming from when in a crowd or noisy room. Audiologists told me that the brain can instantly determine the direct of most sound that enters the ear direct, but it can't be so precise when it receives sound via hearing aids. This fascinates me. Story 15. Hold on to your hats, folks. This is a goodie. Men, remember the turn you head and cough thing at the doctor's? What's being felt there is the muscle wall of the lower abdomen. But the trick is, that edge to the side would be, in women, the labia majora. Feel up to the dimple above the male body part and over the top to the other side. Now trade male body part for clitoris. Same structure. Follow on down under, feeling through the scrotum, and you feel the bump tube of the urethra, underside of the male body part. Keep going and you'll feel a dent where the tubes of the male body part go into the body, but short of the ring muscle of the anus. That dent is where your female body part would have been if female. Male and female genitals are homologs. An analog has a different source but similar form. Flamingos and baleen whales have an analogous mouth structure, for example. Both are designed to filter food from water. A homolog has a similar source but different end structure. And here goes the story. Human embryos from a single cell, graduating into a sphere, and then form a comma shape within that sphere. The sphere becomes the placenta, the comma, the baby. The comma head becomes the head, and the tail forms the spine and torso, with buds for eventual legs and arms. But the torso is hollow and open at the bottom. Along the way, a T-shaped organelle forms in the opening, and further up the digestive bits are taking shape. By this point, the torso already has proto-nipples, so that's why both men and women have nipples. As things progress further, the XX versus XY dichotomy takes over on the hormone front, and the T develops into male body part, prostate, testes on the ends of the T crossbar. Or for women, clitoris, uterus, ovaries on the crossbar. Male urethra forms from bladder to male body part tip. Female urethra connects to just under the clitoris. Note the male urethra splits the two erectile tubes to reach the bladder, while the female erectile tubes are separated by both the urethra and the female body part. At the end, the male opening grows together to close the abdomen and creates the raphe, which is the stripe scar down the underside of the male body part and scrotum, where that part of the protolabia minora grew together. For the ladies, you get the clitoral hood and labia minora either side of the female body part. To be fair, the specific starting cell cluster isn't exactly the same for fetal male and female, but the process is parallel and uses similar structures optimized for intimacy difference. The end of it is that we differ by degree. Story 16. The DNA in your cells is the same whether it is skin, sperm, or blood. So how come cells are able to have different functions, shapes, etc.? Epigenetics, aka different ligands and accessories attached to the DNA like methyl group, are able to direct the cells towards unique functions. Story 17. When a woman is pregnant, small bits of the baby's DNA cross the uterus barrier and stay in her body even after birth. So every child a woman carried has changed her forever. Humans have stripes, but we usually cannot see them. On the same subject, a lot of women are chimeras and don't know about it. They have different DNA in different parts of their bodies. Only a small portion discover it thanks to situations that demand DNA testing. Story 18. Proprioception is our body's ability to know where it is in space. You can hold out your right hand, turn your head to the left, and close your eyes, and you'll still be able to take your left pointer finger and find your right pointer finger, even though you cannot see it. Answer: I used to have a male patient who was extremely and intentionally difficult. He was legally blind but could still see a little bit. He once demanded that I put his male body part into the urinal and hold it while he peed. I told him no, that he could do it himself. He said he couldn't because he was blind. I gave him the spiel about proprioception and he snapped. Just give me the darn urinal, LOL. Story 19. So there are these little bugs that live on your face. Pretty much everyone has them. Demodex, they are called. A mite that lives in human hair follicles, usually on your face. You can't wash them off as they bury too deep. They eat your oily face sebum and reproduce at night. Story 20. Studies have shown that trauma can be inherited through markers on a person's genome that persist over multiple generations, meaning psychological trauma can be passed down through genetics. For example, if your grandparent experiences a traumatic event in early childhood, say a parent's passing, and lacks the appropriate support system to deal with the loss, the trauma they hold from this event can be passed to their child, which in turn can be passed to you. Story 21. Estrogen affects more than just women's moods. It rules our immune function, brain power, appetite, optimism, digestion, strength, pain tolerance, balance. Yep, it's legitimately harder to stand on one leg at certain points in your cycle. For those that don't know, estrogen is the hormone that decreases in the lead up to a woman's period, which is called the luteal phase. This is what causes PMS. Lower estrogen basically means every bodily function you can think of gets less effective. And then on top of all of this, we get to look forward to a permanent lowering and eventually loss of estrogen when we enter perimenopause. This can hit as early as 35. But a lot of doctors are really reluctant to prescribe HRT to cis women, even though trans women take it indefinitely, because it might be kind of bad for your kidneys or something. They'd much prefer we just spend 50 years of our lives going through what is essentially permanent PMS. So yeah, as a 33-year-old chronically ill girly with an autoimmune condition, several mental health disorders, and IBS, I, for one, will be holding my GP hostage the second I sense peri on the horizon, until I get the good shoot. Edit. It sounded like I was saying it's easier for trans women to get HRT than cis women, when I'm aware this isn't the case at all. Getting access to hormones for all trans people is an uphill battle, even in the best case scenario. Apologies for sounding flippant. Answer. Yeah, the whole HRT for cis women is weird. I've told several cis women to get their hormones checked and ask for estrogen because obviously the symptoms of low estrogen are the same as for trans women. I also believe that most of the risks of HRT are from the old estrogen that's taken from horse urine instead of the stuff we have now. Regardless, can't recommend estrogen enough. Story 22. The part of your brain responsible for talking is different than the part responsible for singing. Some people that have strokes that damage the part of the brain for speech, limiting their ability to talk normally, can sing songs with words with no problem. Story 23. The methylation process has a ton of different cofactors, including high enough ferritin levels, magnesium, potassium, active B6, and a shitload of other cofactors. And this process controls literally all neurochemistry production. I find it fascinating. Story 24. Have you ever wondered why most animals all seem to basically look alike, at least until you become very familiar with some particular pet or something, whereas humans seem to be quite distinct? Human faces, like our overall bodies, generally from one individual to another, are very similar in shape. We are not really different from other animals that way. People just seem very unique because our brains are highly tuned to differentiate faces. Also, attractiveness in faces, aside from symmetry and masculinity, femininity, is mainly just about being the most average-looking face possible, meaning proportions that are most typical. Lactose intolerance affects half of Americans, and it's not a medical condition or flaw in any way. It's just not typical for human adults in general to be able to consume cow's milk. The idea that everyone should be able to drink it mainly comes from the dairy industry, and maybe a little bit of racism. Cheese and pizza may be worth whatever the consequences are, though. It's also not normal for humans to be able to routinely drink adult beverage safely. That idea also comes from the adult beverage industry. Answer. Can agree in the distinct faces part. The human body is already attuned to recognizing different faces because we've grown up surrounded by each other. Most animals, you haven't seen multitudes of them closely enough to start recognizing them, so they all look the same to you. You might have seen a golden retriever and a lab, and know they have different faces, but probably not a bunch of golden retrievers on a regular basis to start recognizing their different faces. Though if you study animals enough, you can learn how to differentiate them by faces. I've been drawing cats all my life, and I can tell different cats from each other like people, even if they have the same coloring and markings. Never to the same degree as people, obviously, but it's just getting familiar with all their features and how they're different. Story 25. There is a gland in your chest called the thymus gland that creates T cells, which are cells made to destroy bacteria that enters the body. They are released when white blood cells are not able to control the spread of the bacteria. They are like the Marines of the immune system. The thymus starts to shrink at age 15. That's why as you get older, you are more prone to getting sick. You can slow down its shrinkage by eating food rich in antioxidants. Story 26. Your liver can regenerate, and up to 23 of a liver is taken during a living donor transplant. It takes about 6 to 8 weeks for the donor's liver to regrow back to normal size and function. The piece of liver that is transplanted will also grow to fit the recipient's body. Story 27. My life flash before my eyes moment is basically your brain taking you through a list of scenarios you have been through before to try and find something similar so you know what to do in the situation you're currently in. It's basically trying to find a similar instinct in a matter of seconds. Fight, flight, or freeze. Story 28. You can essentially switch over to using only body fat for nutrition via fasting. And when done correctly, you won't be hungry at all. We still have an ancient system built into us. Our hunter-gathering ancestors used when they went days or weeks without food. Story 29. The mitochondria originated in our cells because a host eukaryotic cell engulfed an alpha protobacteria. The two became symbiotic and helped each other out. Fast forward to present time, where our bodies require ATP, energy produced by the mitochondria, for functioning. There's actually a side effect of some antibiotics that can bind to the mitochondria and stop it from making ATP as a side effect because the mitochondria's bacterial origin. Story 30. It's said the human immune system is the second most complex thing in the known universe, beside the brain itself, which also plays several important roles for the immune system. Even though science figured out a lot of stuff about the immune system in the brain, there are still an unfathomable lot of unanswered questions. Scientists say they're still researching the elementary basics. There's more than enough for plenty of centuries for researching. Not to mention the many complex metabolic reactions in the body, with the countless types of proteins being part of the immune system and outside of it. Crazy stuff. We're just scratching the surface. I highly recommend the book Immune by Philip Detmer, Kurzgesagt, in a nutshell. A sneak peek into the immune system. Over 400 mind-blowing pages. Story 31. Our eyes don't typically glow. We would have to have a tapetum lucidum, an additional body part that redirects back any light into the retina that missed the photoreceptors in the first pass-through, improving night vision for the phenomena to occur, of which humans do not have. It's kind of like the cat's eyes glow when you shine a light directly at them. This reflected light, or eyeshine, is what we see when a cat's eyes appear to be glowing. Eyeshine occurs in a wide variety of colors, including white, blue, green, yellow, pink, and red. However, since eyeshine is a type of iridescence, the color varies with the angle at which it is seen and the minerals which make up the reflective tapetum lucidum crystals. Ferrets, raccoons, flying foxes, owl monkeys, cattle, frogs, wolf spiders, bears, horses, strepsirrhini, reindeers, and crocodilians are other examples of animals that have it because they are largely nocturnal hunters-foragers. Note that even though humans lack a tapetum lucidum, there is some reflection from the choroid, which consists of blood vessels at the back of the eye socket. This is what produces red eye in photos taken with a bright flash. Story 32. Light-colored eyes are structurally colored. It depends on how light is reflected and scattered by the fluids and fibers of the iris. Brown eyes also scatter light in this way, but are also pigmented by melanin. This light scattering is similar to how light is scattered by the Earth's atmosphere, which makes the sky appear blue. Story 33. Had an ovary removed in my teens years due to it tying itself in a knot with the fallopian tube and never missed a period. My OB-GYN explained that the other ovary will pick up the slack and is now twice the size of a regular ovary. I still have my period on time every month. It's just 3 days though. Story 34. The human brain lies to everyone all the time. Decisions to do things sometimes happen well after they have already been done, and people believe they decided, when in fact the nervous system did it for them, automatically, well before the brain was even aware, and significantly before the mind could process it. But when asked about what they did and why, they're convinced they had made a choice. Brain scans prove this is not what happens. Story 35. Pineapples contain bromelain, an enzyme that breaks down proteins. When you eat fresh pineapple, this enzyme works on the proteins in your mouth's protective layer. Thus, the pineapple, thinking it is meat, starts eating your tongue, and that's why it tingles and feels funny. Story 36. The maximum weight a person, any person, can lift with one arm is about 300 kilograms to 500. But this ability is not available most time, as muscles are suppressed by nerves to not produce too much power. Otherwise, you will shatter your own bones by your own muscles. Story 37. Your nose can detect about 1 trillion different smells, but your brain often ignores most of them because it's wired to prioritize survival-relevant scents, like smoke or rot. What's truly WTF is that your olfactory system can identify smells you've never encountered before by combining basic odor patterns, like a chemical Lego set. And it's so sensitive it can detect some molecules at concentrations as low as a few parts per trillion. You're basically a walking, unconscious super sniffer, picking up a universe of odors you'll never consciously notice. Story 38. There's an experience called auditory pareidolia, the situation where a person will hear voices or music that sound like they're coming from the next room over, but it's a function of the brain trying to make sense of random background noise like an air conditioner. Totally normal, nothing wrong, just very disconcerting. Story 39. I don't care if this is well known or not, but my roommate was a nursing major in college, and she told me she learned that if you have a particular aversion to a food, like one you just dislike and never have liked, it's oftentimes because your body is protecting you from an allergy or a sensitivity. Story 40. Every cell in your heart is a pacemaker, nature's backup to restarting the pump. Electrical conduction can be initiated by any cell, causing a cascade in the wrong direction flow, resulting in dysrhythmias. Disease, trauma, and ischemia cause a disruption of the normal pathway of electrical conductivity. Also, fun fact, you can have an electrical reading but no muscle activity, called pulseless electrical activity, PEA. So, check for a pulse and don't rely on monitors. Everyone, please learn CPR. Story 41. When in utero, a fetus doesn't use its lungs to get oxygen, since it gets it via the placenta. Because the baby's lungs are off, the circulation is set up to bypass your lungs. Instead, we all have a foramen ovale, which is a small flap-like opening between the right and left atriums of the heart. The oxygenated blood comes from the placenta through the umbilical vein and eventually into the right atrium. A stream of that oxygen-rich blood is directed across the foramen ovale into the left atrium, and then it does other circulatory stuff. Once we start breathing, the foramen ovale closes functionally within a few minutes to hours once pressures change, and over months to a couple of years the tissue seals permanently. In 25 of people that doesn't fully fuse, and you're left with a patent foramen ovale, aka a hole in your heart. Depending on its size, it may cause no problems at all, or possibly increase your risk of a stroke. I know all of this because I had unexplained heart palpitations a few years ago. Turns out it was a weird quirk of that particular bout of COVID, and I haven't had them since. But I did do a stress test and a bubble study in which agitated saline is injected into my vein, and my hear it monitored by an echocardiogram to see if bubbles appear in the left atrium. Mine took 3 cycles, so they are fairly confident it is a PFO, but over 3 cycles could also point towards something else. I kind of forgot about it after that since the palpitations have stopped, but I should probably follow up eventually. Story 42. This is somewhat dirty, but here it goes. When we fart, our rear end tells us on whether it is gonna stink or not, even before we smell it. Passing simple air feels differently than passing a stink bomb. It's like our rear end has sensor, which warn us in advance about it. Story 43. So your nervous system is constantly ignoring receptors, such as ones on your rear, when you're sitting so you're not constantly feeling things, or on your skin, so your brain isn't flooded with signals, etc. But when you take LSD, it messes with this system, and why people are just overwhelmed with feelings generally. Story 44. I never knew about heterotopic pregnancies until I had one, randomly. It's when you have essentially twins, but one is in the uterus and one in the tube. I miscarried what I thought was a normal pregnancy at 7 weeks. Then at 10 weeks, I was still pregnant, and no one could figure out why. Until they gave me an ultrasound and noticed the one on my tube. Kind of scary when you think about it. Story 45. You can hold your breath 30 longer by putting your face underwater. Facial immersion, especially in cold water, stimulates the trigeminal nerve, triggering the reflex. This leads to bradycardia, slowing of the heart rate, which conserves oxygen. Peripheral vasoconstriction. Blood flow is reduced in the extremities, prioritizing oxygen supply to vital organs like the heart and brain. Spleen contraction in trained individuals, which releases extra red blood cells into circulation, increasing oxygen capacity. Source, freediver. Story 46. The majority of the retina is covered in a fairly thick mat of connective cells, nerves, blood vessels, and whatnot. The light-sensitive parts are under a pile of muck. Worse, most of the retina has very low resolution. Only one small part, fovea centralis, is really HD. In order to capture a picture, the human eye zips all over the place super fast, taking snapshots of every part of an image, with the fovea doing something called microsaccade, very poor design, or fairly standard evolution. Either way. Story 47. Here's a cool trick you can do with a clock. Look away from it, and without moving your head, look right back at the clock as the second hand moves. Only works if it ticks and doesn't constantly move, or if it's digital when the second changes. If you do it right, it will seem like the second lasts around 2 seconds. Then it keeps ticking like normal. This is because when your eyes shift suddenly, your brain erases the sight of the blurred movement and replaces it with what you shifted your eyes to. So instead of seeing a blur and then a second on the clock, you're seeing 2 seconds, even though only 1 second has passed. Learn that one from Vsauce. Story 48. Stem cells are wild. 1. Dormant repair squads. Some stem cells can remain inactive for decades, then activate precisely where the body needs repair, like a hidden emergency team. 2. Partial limb tip regrowth. In children, stem cells in fingertips can regenerate bone, skin, and nail if the tip is injured. 3. Heart repair potential. Cardiac stem cells can form new heart muscle cells, giving limited natural repair after minor heart damage. 4. Brain plasticity boosters. Neural stem cells can generate new neurons even in adulthood, helping the brain adapt, learn, and recover from injury. 5. Liver regeneration. Liver stem cells allow the liver to regrow from as little as 25 of its original tissue, a feat no other human organ can match. 6. Blood rejuvenation. Hematopoietic stem cells in bone marrow constantly produce new blood and immune cells, replacing trillions of cells over a lifetime. 7. Skin renewal. Epidermal stem cells keep your skin regenerating, repairing cuts, burns, and abrasions faster than almost any other organ. 8. Potential age reversal. Some stem cells can rejuvenate themselves in surrounding tissues, partially turning back the clock at a cellular level. 9. Muscle repair. Satellite cells, muscle stem cells, can rebuild damaged muscle fibers after injury or extreme exertion, giving your body a natural super repair ability. 10. Cross-organ adaptability. Certain stem cells can migrate and transform into different tissue types under extreme conditions. A real-life shape-shifting repair system. Story 49. The recurrent laryngeal nerve branches off from the vagus nerve and goes down into the upper chest, looping around the aortic arch before synapsing back into the central nervous system. It is upheld as prime evidence of natural evolution from a common ancestor because every vertebrate has this weird nerve in some form. It takes a far straighter route in fish than it does in land animals, and is even found in giraffes, where it takes an extreme detour of over 4 meters to follow the same path. Story 50. 1. Ticklishness is learned. Babies mimic us when we prod their tummies and laugh, so it becomes hardwired in their brains. In other cases where physical therapy is involved, the brain uses ticklishness as a first defense response before pain, which is why some things tickle, then hurt. Your nerves can sometimes lie to you about sensations to protect you. 2. Similar to how you feel hunger instead of extreme thirst. If you were starved of both food and water, your brain will register thirst, then eventually gravitate to just hunger. It is trying to protect you because the sensation of thirst is maddening, but hunger is a sensation one can tolerate for a bit. 3. Cartilage is avascular, meaning it has no blood flow, but ears and nose are the only things to continue growing and growing on you into old age. 4. The skin type that makes up the lips on your face is the same on your anus. Kissing one or both can still give you pink eye. 5. You can poop every day and still be constipated. Your refuse should be thick and fluffy. If you have skinny little baby poopies, absolutely take a fiber supplement because you're constipated. You can also retain stubborn weight gain from an irregular bowel. If you get a handle on your digestive system, you could lose weight long term. Our bodies tend to pack on pounds if we aren't pooping on the regular. 6. Our brains can only really track 2 stimulating things on our bodies at a time. This proves to be quite useful when trying to give fussy babies shots. You distract them with a song, gently touch both of their elbows or hands or knees, and make sure they watch you doing this. They generally don't register needles anywhere else. 7. Female body parts self-clean. Douches only increase the odds for complications or infections. There are so many more, but I find these super interesting. Bodies are frickin' cool. Story 51. Every human has something called anal sampling, or recto-anal inhibitory reflex, where nerves in and around your lower GI tract, rectum, distinguish between flatus, farts, and feces, shoot. Without this reflex, you would constantly not know if you were going to fart or shoot yourself. Would make for some high-stakes gas passing. Story 52. You produce 3 types of tears. One keeps the eye lubricated, another to protect the eye when there is something foreign, an irritant present, and finally the sad tears. When you cry, as in true stressed out, sad, unhappy, crocodile tears type cry, cortisol, the stress hormone, is present in those tears. You really can cry it out. Story 53. The most dangerous time for an electrical shock to the heart, including from a lightning strike, is during the vulnerable period, which occurs during the T wave on an electrocardiogram, ECG. The T wave represents the repolarization, recovery, phase of the ventricles. The risk. During this window, an electrical jolt can disrupt the heart's natural rhythm and throw it into a chaotic and ineffective quivering, known as ventricular fibrillation. In ventricular fibrillation, the heart can no longer pump blood effectively, leading to a sudden and life-threatening form of cardiac arrest. The R on T phenomenon. A lightning strike occurring during this vulnerable period is analogous to the R on T phenomenon, in which a premature electrical impulse, R wave, falls on the T wave of the previous beat, triggering a deadly ventricular arrhythmia. Story 54. Your bones are about 5 times stronger than steel. Yet ounce for ounce, they're also lighter than concrete, and they continuously break down and rebuild themselves completely about every 10 years, meaning your skeleton today isn't the same one you had a decade ago. Story 55. We could significantly reduce the number of heart attacks and strokes if we paid more attention to the air we breathe, especially indoors. Tiny particles like microplastics and fine dust can enter the bloodstream when inhaled, promoting inflammation and plaque buildup in the arteries. Yet we never treat air like food, even though we consume around 16,000 liters of it every day, affecting our body just as directly. And microplastics are not the only harmful particles in the air we breathe. Story 56. You experience symptoms of schizophrenia, even when you're not diagnosed. Remember when you had that song stuck in your head? People with schizophrenia have the same thing, but with voices. Abnormal behavior is just extreme manifestations of normal behavior. Learned it in college, never been the same low-key. Story 57. After you die, the last thing to go typically is your hearing. So you could be dead for the last handful of seconds, but you can hear your family or doctors or anything around you still going on for the tiniest amount of time. When people jump off of extremely high buildings, bridges, etc., to eliminate themselves, a lot of times, depending on the height of the structure, the wind will eliminate themselves person before they even hit the ground, especially if you're inhaling on the way down. If it's not the wind, then it's a heart attack. And if not a heart attack, then it's hitting the ground. Sometimes after passing, the deceased will sit up, groan, move, etc. And it's not because they're alive, it's because it's gas and air leaving the body. Also, before you die, 9 times out of 10, your body will have a burst of energy. It's like a false hope for you and your family and the doctors. Babies have all of their teeth when they're born, even the adult teeth. They're just hidden behind the eyes, if that makes sense. Story 58. Microchimerism is when the fetal cells pass through the placenta into the mother's brain and can become part of the mother's DNA. It can change the mother's health. It is also believed that a mother and child have a strong bond. Also, if the mother has a son, parts of the father's DNA can enter the mother's brain as a fetal cell. My daughter knows how to explain it better, but your baby's DNA can become a part of your brain or other organs and change the mother's health. If it's a son, the father's DNA can be a part of it too. So ladies, if you have a boy, your baby daddy can be a part of you for decades, so you never can get rid of him, LOL. Story 59. You can have something really painful happening on the left side of your body. Happens a lot with teeth, but feel it on your right, or vice versa. Details get mixed up when the nerves are transmitting pain signals. Turns out my organs could benefit from tagging themselves with an L and an R. Idiots. Story 60. Phantasmia. I don't know if someone experienced this or not, but my nose had it since COVID attacked me. I have some problem in my nose actually, sinusitis. And I remember first time I smell something burn, but not electricity. Something burn like someone burning food. But I was alone in my room, no one with me. First, I didn't notice that was weird, but every time I go outside, alone, randomly, I can smell something. Worst and not worst. Story 61. If you have 2 arms, you're truly above average. If you were to take the number of arms on the planet and divide by the number of people, you'd come out with a number less than 2 because there's people with 1 or 0 arms. So the average number of arms for a human is 1.99999. Story 62. If you got diarrhea and go shoot a lot, your anus could swell from inside, making you think that you need to go to again. That happens cause colon doesn't have any detection of material and instead checks for pressure. If pressure is present, it sends signal to your brain that you need to go do some dirty stuff, and swelling applies that pressure. Story 63. Most of the cells in your body die off and are replaced in a year. So technically, you can be a mostly new person in a year. It is encouraging if you are making better health choices for your body because it truly can heal to a better version of you. Story 64. My thoughts are generally experienced as an inner monologue, an actual voice speaking inside my head, typically my own voice. I was surprised when I learned that many people don't experience thought that way. For some people, it's a series of images. In other ways I don't understand well enough to try to describe. I've met people who thought an inner monologue was just a literary device, rather than the way some people experience thought. How is this about the human body? Simply that so far, we still don't understand the brain well enough to identify why people can experience thought and consciousness so differently. Story 65. You know how when you hold your breath, you get that increasing urge to breathe until it becomes unbearable? You might think that instinct is based on lacking oxygen, but actually your body doesn't know whether there's oxygen in what you're breathing. It does know that CO2 is building in your circulatory system and needs to be expelled. That is the signal that cues the instinct to breathe. The terrifying result of this, you can breathe in an environment with little oxygen and you won't feel like gasping for air. You will keep expelling CO2, keeping your body's sensors happy while slowly suffocating. You'll get tired, pass out, and die without those alarm instincts ever going off. Story 66. The left lung is slightly smaller than the right to accommodate the heart, which is mostly on the left. This is true unless you have dextrocardia, where the heart is more to the right. Dextrocardia, situs inversus totalis, where all your organs are on the opposite side, or heterodoxy, where all your organs are in the wrong place. Story 67. The omentum. We have a little security blanket inside of us. My own very basic explanation. A thin apron-like tissue that wraps itself around damaged organs inside your abdominal cavity. I learned about this after a dissection class, and although I went to study fascia, this stuck out for me while we were in the abdominal cavity looking at the organs. It looked like a very thin, translucent sheet of tissue, about the size of a hand towel. In some cadavers, it was very visible and perfectly open, not tangled up. In other cadavers, it was bunch tangled and/or actually wrapped around an organ. It was amazing learning and seeing that, and here are some ChatGPT notes on it. The omentum is a layer, or actually 2 layers, of fatty tissue that hangs down from your stomach and drapes over your intestines, kind of like an internal apron. Immune defense, the abdominal policeman. The omentum can detect infection or inflammation in the abdomen and move toward it to help isolate and fight it off. It's full of immune cells and can wrap itself around infected or damaged areas, like a burst appendix or surgical site. Story 68. Breastfeeding can cause your female body part to atrophy. It can shrink. The mons can shrink, as can the labia, and you can lose hair down there. Those are the external changes. Internally, the vaginal canal shortens and tightens. The skin of the walls get thinner, and you'll get drier and more prone to thrush and UTIs. Also can happen after menopause. In both cases, due to hormonal changes. Story 69. How caffeine works, simplified, is by convincing your body that you're dying to artificially induce a fight or flight response. Caffeine is molecularly shaped very similarly to adenosine, so it takes up receptor sites. Your brain freaks out because the adenosine it has created doesn't seem to be having an effect, so it releases endorphins. Likewise, the crash is due to a flooding of adenosine to its respective receptor sites as caffeine molecules break down, freeing these sites up. Story 70. Curl your toes when you come. It makes the sensation more intense. Also, when you're working your gag reflex, tuck them into your palm and close your fingers around it. Think a fist with the thumb under the fingers. It makes your gag reflex less active. I wonder how many people will read this and gag themselves in their kitchens. Story 71. I used to work in cardiology. I now work in a hospital, some weeks in the ER. Your heart can give itself a bypass. Sometimes when you have a blockage in your coronary arteries, your heart can create feeders that go around it, and it'll function as normal. If you have a very high heart rate, if you feel your pulse on your neck, gently massage where you feel the hardest heartbeat, and it could bring your heart rate down and bring you out of some arrhythmias. I've seen it used on SVT. Be pundits like a pulse ox with you so you don't go too low. If you have a high heart rate and you sit down and act like you're having a bowel movement, the vagus nerve will bring your heart rate down. All of your arteries carry oxygen-rich blood way from your heart, besides your pulmonary arteries. They carry oxygen-poor blood from your heart to your lungs. All of your veins being back oxygen-poor blood to your heart, besides the pulmonary veins. They bring oxygen-rich blood back to the left atrium of the heart. The pubic artery has to be imaged a lot of times before surgery is performed, because the pubic artery and its branches are in the crown of passing, which means if they're injured, the patient can die quickly. Although it's not a main artery like the carotid, thoracic aorta, common iliac, femoral, popliteal, posterior tibial, anterior tibial, fibular, dorsalis pedis, auxiliary, brachial, ulnar, or radial. Your left ventricle is so powerful that if it goes into heart failure, it can cause backflow to go through the left atrium, pulmonary veins, lungs, pulmonary arteries, and back into the right ventricle, and cause the right ventricle to also go into heart failure. Most of your arteries get blood during systole. Your coronaries around your heart get blood during diastole. Most people think 100 of blood flow back to the heart comes from the venous system, when the reality is your cardiac venous system brings blood back to all four chambers, mostly in your right atrium and the least in your left ventricle. You can be the cleanest female and wipe and still get a bacterial UTI. Everyone's body has C. diff and other bacteria, and taking too many antibiotics can set them off. When peeing in a cup, it's best to pee a small bit in the toilet before peeing in the actual cup, because peeing into the cup without peeing into the toilet first can cause your test to come back with false positives for infections. The best time to take a urine pregnancy test is in the morning. The pregnancy tests that they give you at the hospital are the exact same as the ones sold over the counter. The exact moment your body dies, it starts to decay. Redheads need slightly more anesthesia than everyone else because the receptor that makes their hair red also acts as a pain receptor. Story 72. Humans can glow. Yes, you read it properly. It's called ultra-weak bioluminescence, or biophoton emission. It's caused by chemical reactions in your cells, but the light is so weak it's not noticeable by the naked eye. Technically, it can be caught with special equipment if you were to sit still for hours in a completely dark room. Story 73. Here's one that always blows people's minds a little. Did you know your stomach literally gets a new lining every few days? Like every 3 to 4 days, it replaces itself, so the strong acid inside doesn't eat through it. Isn't that wild? It's basically saving you from digesting yourself. Story 74. If not treated quickly, it can damage or destroy the valves. That's why some people have to take antibiotics before dental procedures. Story 75. The body has a backup system for oxygenating you called hypoxia drive. Typically, the automatic act of breathing is triggered by high levels of carbon dioxide. But for people with diseases like COPD, where you have chronically high carbon dioxide, the body triggers the breathing reflex because of low oxygen in the blood. Story 76. Cartilage is one of the only tissue that doesn't use blood vessels to take in nutrients and expel wastes. Cartilage instead relies on fluid being forced out while being used and flowing in while resting. The reason you're taller in the morning is because your cartilage has reinflated. Keep this in mind if you get a joint injury. Your cartilage needs to be used deflated, inflated in order to heal. Story 77. The palmoral longus, I think is the name, and tendon that runs from the wrist down your arm. It is a vestigial tendon from when our ancestors used to climb trees. It's a vestigial muscle tendon that is not used anymore, so humans are evolving them out, which is why some people have them and some don't. I have also recently found this is the same with wisdom teeth. I only have one and have been told by the dentist because they are not used, humans are evolving them out. Thus, you have some people with no wisdom teeth or only one. Story 78. Your gut is an ecosystem comprised of tons of different bacteria that have specific nutritional needs. It's been shown that these bacteria can actually influence specific food cravings. This is also related to why it can be difficult to change dietary habits. Relatedly, a lot of people will have pretty nasty bowel issues when they start trying to eat healthier. The reason is the bacteria in their gut that thrived on less healthy food start to die off en masse as they're not being fed. It can take a couple weeks for the bacteria that like veggies and stuff to recolonize the bowel. This mechanism can be used to cure lactose intolerance by consuming large amounts of dairy products. You'll be in hell for a few weeks as your body adjusts, but eventually you'll get a colony of lactose processing bacteria that makes it easier to handle dairy moving forward. Story 79. With regards to lucid dreaming, the physiological theory about this is in relation to feedback. The process of moving your limbs involves many different sub-processes. It's not just about sending a signal to move the limb. It's about receiving feedback from that limb on what's happening after it moves. So when you grip something, the feedback tells you if it's hard, soft, grippy, slippy, hot, cold, and then you respond appropriately to alter your movement to compensate. Likewise, when you walk, there's feedback from the limb about the state of the ground. Is it even, slanted, bumpy? Is it hard or soft? Is it slippy? Is my body balanced correctly? How much weight is on this limb versus the other one? Etc. The theory is that in the dream state, the brain has difficulty imitating these feedback signals to itself. The body is paralyzed so it can't generate them. In general, the brain can only imitate replay feedback to a limited degree. Hence why your vision is rarely crystal clear. The feeling of moving through space is easy to imitate. But when it comes to complicated feedback like walking, especially walking upstairs or running, your brain can't imitate this very well, only providing a small amount of feedback. And the end result is that from your perspective, you're trying to move your legs but very little is happening. The parts of your brain expecting feedback are only receiving very faint signals. So you end up feeling like you're walking through honey or that your legs simply aren't working. Same as when you go to throw a punch, and no matter how hard you try, you barely tap the other person. Because your body is only able to imitate the feedback with a fraction of the energy it would have in real life. Story 80. The odds of recovering from a coma are very low. These studies are ongoing, and of course, there are different odds by factors that land you on the Glasgow Coma Scale. Story 81. Sabe uma parada curiosa sobre o corpo humano que pouca gente sabe? Nosso estômago se regenera completamente a cada poucos dias. Tipo, as células que revestem ele se renovam rapidinho porque o cirdo que a gente produz dentro tó forte que, se não fosse isso, ele ia basicamente se digerir sozinho. Ácido clorhídrico, o mesmo tipo usado para limpar metal. A gente literalmente um pó de cumica ambulante, que muito bem organizado, haha. Story 82. Your brain makes up stuff a lot. It makes a lot of guesses based on previous experiences, other senses, etc. It's why the mirror therapy thing for phantom limb works. When that mechanism gets messed up, you get things like synesthesia and Alice in Wonderland syndrome. Story 83. 98% of the water in the blood is reabsorbed passively after going through the kidneys. The body regulates the remaining 2% in order to maintain hydration level. It does this by secreting varying amounts of anti-diuretic hormone, ADH. When you drink adult beverage, the adult beverage impairs the release of ADH, which is why you have to pee more often if you drink a lot. It's also why you become dehydrated. Story 84. Your eyeball has a blind spot without rods or cones where the optic nerve is attached. But since we have 2 eyes, our brains rely on the other to fill in the missing data. When only one eye is open, you can see the blind spot using a simple test. The reason we don't see it even with one eye normally is because our brains use surrounding info to fill it in. Story 85. You tend to blink your eyes about 20 times a minute, which equals 10 million times a year. Average person lives for 75 years, so you blink 750 million times in a lifetime. If done 1 time a second, that is equal to 23.782 times a year. A lot of blinking still. Story 86. Pilots in fighter jets and stunt planes sometimes have to wear a suit that has water tubes in it running all over their body. It's meant to distribute the water in high G turns, keeping the pilot's blood pressure up to keep from passing out. Humans actually have a system like that built in. We only discovered it recently because this system empties after passing, so it was never found in autopsies. Story 87. The embryo has 3 layers: inner, middle, and outer. All the tissues in your body developed from one of these. The ectoderm becomes skin, hair, and nails. The mesoderm becomes muscle and connective tissue. And the endoderm becomes all the hollow stuff that has linings in it, like the respiratory tract and the pancreas. Story 88. You have a double-layered sac around your heart called the pericardium. I only know this because I was recently diagnosed with pericarditis and had to have an emergency pericardiocentesis procedure performed, where the cardiologist removed a Coke can's amount of fluid, 355 milliliters, from my pericardium. Story 89. Your brain can be read and written to at a neuron level with the following technology: DARPA N3 program development for mind control nanotechnology. Silent Talk project enables people to communicate with each other with pre-speech in the mind. NESD project developed high-resolution neurotechnology that interfaces with vision and hearing, developed algorithms for reading and writing to neurons. N3 project took elements from the Silent Talk and NESD programs and put it together with non-surgical nanotechnology that can read and write to the whole brain. Overview. Phase 2. Phase 3 remains unpublished. Another interesting source is a research study where they were able to control rats with fine enough motor ability to navigate a maze. Rice University funding for B2B communications. Patent for technology that is able to transfer emotions from one brain to another. Story 90. As impressive as the human body is, and oh boy, I don't know how familiar you are with the 1985-1995 Gen series, but tell what anyway. You think a collision of 2 almost identical properties wouldn't fare so bad? Hell, my testes have been throwing punches so long now that my wife's titties have had another N. Now they get involved. Some morning we get up and go to walk away. Only take a min before y'all realize you're just walking in one spot with a tangled mess behind y'all. What was I saying? Oh, yep. Just because babies come out, don't think they can go back. Shoot, if they can, then don't tell me I know I did do 5 years upstate because of darn angles. Story 91. Restless back syndrome is a real thing. You basically feel an insatiable frustration and the need to flop around like a fish and stretch your back like crazy. I had it once recently and wrenched myself around so much that I threw out my back. Not fun. Story 92. Itch might be inaccurate. Taking pharmacology class and learned about nasal to brain administration route. Apparently that's really easily to bypass brain-blood barrier, since the olfactory neurons connecting to your brain are just hanging out super close to outside world there. Story 93. Under the right conditions, tissues in your body can be vitrified into a kind of organic glass. We know this in part because of a discovery made in the ruins of Herculaneum, destroyed by the same 79 CE eruption of Vesuvius as the more famous Pompeii. A man's remains were found with a glassy black substance that, after being examined, turned out to be the vitrified remains of his brain, which gives an idea of the intensity of the heat that eliminated him. Story 94. When someone has a heart attack, they don't go flatline like the movie show. If someone went flatline, it means they reached the point of no return and can't be saved. The heart needs some sort of electricity, and CPR restarts the irregular electricity in the heart short-circuiting. It doesn't supply the heart with electricity if it's not already there. Story 95. I was told that there's part of the inner ear that changes as we get older, making these kinds of rapid movements seem far more disorienting than when we're young. So there's a legit physical explanation for why kids like these kinds of rides more than adults do. Story 96. Women's breasts are basically modified sweat glands. So I guess if you see a woman with great cleavage, You can express your approval of her appearance by saying, "Wow, what amazing modified sweat glands." And apparently, no one will know what you're actually saying. That should come in handy next time I see a sexy woman wearing a tank top with no bra. Story 97. Our nose is within our field of vision, but our brain edits it out. Because of the blood in our eyes, we see the world as a tiny bit more red than it really is. Our heart has its own brain. Our brain is not as good at organizing names as we think. Instead of putting names and people together one by one, it kind of files people into different boxes, often based on the roles they have in our lives and how important they are to us. When we interact with people, it often pulls a name and a person out of the appropriate box with some randomness to it. This is usually what happens when we accidentally call people by the wrong name. So when grandma gets her grandkids' names mixed up, it does not have to mean that her mind is going. It probably just means that they are all equally important to her. Story 98. The first set of teeth have fully developed roots. Some people think they don't because by the time they fall out, their bottom is flat and without a root. But this is only because the permanent tooth that's following is slowly dissolving the root of the first tooth. Story 99. I had to look this up because I couldn't remember the exact wording. A girl is born with all the eggs she will ever have in her lifetime. These eggs are in her ovaries, which are developing inside her mother's ovaries, while her mother is still a fetus in her grandmother's womb. Basically, my mother helped make my daughter. Real-life biological inception, or conception. Story 100. The male body head evolved in a way that gives you a reproductive advantage. The head is flared, mushroom-shaped, and it scrapes the walls of the female body part during intimacy. That helps scoop out and remove any foreign semen already inside the female body part. Marriage, aka mate exclusivity, is a relatively new concept in human history. For a lot longer, males had to compete with rival males to reproduce, leading to this feature. A male will also thrust harder and thrust more times during intimacy if he suspects the female has mated with another male. The thrusting motion of intimacy helps with the semen removal process. Story 101. We evolved eating less than 20 Gs of carbohydrates per day for most of the millions of years. And eating carbs puts your body in an unnatural energy state, which causes your mitochondria to age faster and your cells to become senescent before your health span should be up. Ketosis, along with intermittent fasting, is the natural state of our bodies. And if we continue to feed them gasoline, they're going to continue to burn out before their time, slowly. Story 102. Regarding male body, a pretty amount of men already have heard that seat heating, laptop on lap, everything heating down there, can impact fertility. But very less know this can actually be used for male contraception. Either short-time wet heat, studied since the 40s in India, Japan, USA, Swiss, or long-time body temperature, thermal male birth control, using testicle ascent, a silicone ring, andro switch, or special brief jockstrap, slip chauffon, is used to hold the testicles in inguinal channels, 15-day, every day. This does increase the testicle temperature by some 2 degrees, which does suppress sperm production below contraceptive threshold of 1 mil. 1 myo-OML was set at hormonal trials, which correspond to Pearl Index 1 there. Also, sperm motility is greatly reduced with thermal. I have 0 motil, 0 vital at 0.5 milliliters, PI 0.5 because of user fault. Story 103. Women's breasts are not fully developed at birth and develop dramatically during puberty and later during pregnancy. This is why it is critical to provide healthy diets and avoid harmful environmental factors to help teens mature with lower risk of breast cancer. That's it for this video. Don't forget to support Vancher and my second channel, Vanchoose. See you soon.